overcoming perfectionism by seeking refinement instead. That's going to be the topic of this episode of Chi Life. So the inspiration for this topic has come from some conversations that I've had with people recently, as often these topics do come from that, as well as just thinking about how the concepts that we find within Qigong, within Chinese medicine and Chinese philosophy generally, can apply to different aspects of our lives. And some of these conversations that I've had recently have centered around the imperfectness of life. The way that there is a lot of uncertainty within our lives, and that is not a problem, that's a feature of life. It's part of what makes it interesting, it's part of what makes it worth living. The fact that we don't know everything that's going to happen in our lives, we can't control everything, and we need to be able to flow with the imperfections. And in a way, these imperfections are part of what create the inherent, in a sense, perfection of life. When we seek to control things too much, when we feel like everything has to be a certain way, when we have that perfectionist tendency within us, it can lead to some really bad outcomes. And I know a lot of you watching this are probably going to be able to recognize this, either within yourselves or within people around you that you know, where this desire to control things so much actually leads to really unpleasant and sometimes even harmful outcomes, both for ourselves and for other people as well. Now, this cuts across, so many different areas of our lives. I'll focus on one main one, and that is where, often people have a desire to do something. They might really want to do it, but they have an idea that it has to be perfect before they can even start. And because of that, they never start, because that's not how things work. We tend not to be perfect at anything straight away. Or maybe it's not that extreme, but maybe they feel like it has to be perfect before they show anyone else. Before they let anyone see the thing that it is that they're doing. And this often, again, will mean that they keep that thing to themselves and they don't get very far with it. Because in so many things in life, we actually develop, again, we're not perfect at anything straight away, but we actually develop step by step. We develop by doing it. By doing it, we learn things that there's no way we could have understood without actually going and trying it. There's so much that we can learn from studying and thinking and so on, but there's so much that we only ever learn by doing and experiencing for ourselves. And so if you hold back from doing that, you never make those steps that would lead you towards improving and developing and moving towards perfection in what you do. In a similar way, even if you are taking those steps and trying and, doing things, we also often learn so much from our interaction with others, from their feedback, from seeing how they respond, seeing the effects that it has. And that then acts as a step-by-step process to develop things and get better at them. And so as I was thinking about this a little bit, and, partly from these conversations I've had recently, I thought about how this ties in with the understanding of the 5 elements that we talk about within Chinese philosophy, and we apply it to our Qigong practice and to Chinese medicine and so on. And there's not really a concept of perfection within the 5 elements. The closest we come to that is, in something connected to the 5 elements, the concept of Wuji. So Wuji is the formless state that exists before differentiation, before opposites occur, before there's polarity. From that comes Taiji, the polarity, which creates dynamic movement. And then from that we get the Wuxing, the 5 elements and all the phases and all the richness that comes from that, that leads to the 10,000 things, which is all the many things we experience in life. And in some sense, we can sometimes think of Wuji as being a state of perfection because it contains everything within it. But even when we look at Wuji, one of the most common ways that Wuji is depicted is as a simple drawing of a circle, but it's drawn with one brushstroke. And so inherently, it's not a perfectly symmetrical circle. It has little flaws within it. It's generally depicted with a slight opening in it so it doesn't fully close. And those are all features of it. Because to just see a perfectly symmetrical circle maybe drawn with a compass, okay, maybe there's some kind of beauty within it, but it's not very interesting. Whereas when we have that hand-drawn, freestyle circle drawn with a brush, that has an inherent beauty within it. That has character within it. And that actually comes from the so-called imperfections, which are actually a feature of it. And this is part of life, again, that imperfection is part of what makes it perfect. So anyway, going beyond that concept of Wuji, I thought, well, how does this relate to the 5 elements? And within that, the element that really comes closest to this idea of creating perfection, and often people who have a real perfectionist tendency have a lot of these elemental characteristics within them, is the element of metal. But when we think about that metal element, it's not, we don't normally talk about it as the element of perfection. That's not really what it's about. It's the element that brings everything together. It finalizes everything. It sorts out all the details. That's the phase of energy that metal refers to. But the way we normally talk about the quality of this element is as refining. Not as reaching perfection, but as refining. And refinement is normally inherently an iterative process. It's something that we go through stage by stage by stage, and little by little it becomes more precise, purer, better. And I thought that's a useful thing for people who are seeking to overcome their perfectionist tendencies. Because when you recognize that refinement is an iterative process, by iterative, that means that you take steps and little by little it gets closer to your end. And often within iterative processes, there's an implication that we're never actually going to get to the precise, absolute perfection, but we'll just get closer and closer over time. I think that's much more accurate for what we experience in life, that we, step by step, we improve at things. And also by having this understanding, it can help us to take those steps, to realize that those steps are just a natural part of the process of moving towards improvement, moving towards what we absolutely want. We may never reach perfection as such, but by taking those steps, trying those things that we want to do, showing where we're at to other people and sharing it with them, each of those is a step towards refinement. And this approach, I think, can help us to get past that blockage of thinking it has to be perfect before we even begin, before we even share. There's an old saying, and I've used it before in other vlogs. I've talked about perfectionism previously in other vlogs as well. This is just a little bit of a different spin on it that I hope is useful maybe for someone watching this vlog. And that is that perfection is the enemy of progress. And that's because whenever we seek perfection, it's never going to happen. So we don't even start, we don't move forwards. Whereas when we instead think of refinement, well, refinement, that is very much the friend of progress, because we start where we're at, and with each step that lets us see a little bit something else we can do to make it better, to make it better, to make it better, and we progress towards our ultimate desired aim. Anyway, a little thought that I thought might be helpful to share with you, that maybe someone would appreciate and benefit from. A way to reframe things. If you have those perfectionist tendencies, perhaps instead think, maybe I can focus on refinement. And by focusing on refinement, make it okay within myself to be able to be imperfect along my journey towards improvement and development and becoming more precise, more accurate, more valuable, and so on. Anyway, again, I hope that was useful, maybe interesting. If you haven't enjoyed the vlog, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all those good things. And I look forward to seeing you on another one soon.